public because we've had a Ms. Phillips, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, she sounds like she's doing it now.
She can hear us.
Okay, you can hear us, we can't hear
I can
you.
put it on my audio.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we hear you, yes, indeedy. Ms. Evans, can you hear us?
Yes, good afternoon. I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much. We've had the streaming issue, and so we're trying desperately to do this remotely and get it done, so thank you.
Ms. Phillips, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me clearly?
No, it's. You can hear us, we can't hear you. Oh, yes, now we hear you. There we go.
All right, okay. Well, I now hear Ms. Phillips, and I'm going to swear you in if you would raise your right hand, please. Thank you. Do you swear and affirm that your testimony and any statements that you make before us today to be truthful and complete?
I do.
Thank you. And we'll take your statement now.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Barnes, members and staff of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor, and the public. I am Joy Phillips, Associate Director for Data Analysis and Visualization in the DC Office of Planning. OP's role in the petition process is limited to validating that enough signatures have been collected. When someone petitions to have an initiative included on a district ballot, OP performs its narrow role of validating the petition, which is prescribed by Title III of the DC Municipal Regulations, Section 1009.7. OP's Data Analysis and Visualization Unit, formerly the Data Management Unit, works with the DC Board of Elections to determine if the petition includes enough valid signatures from each ward to qualify for inclusion on the ballot. For each ward, there is a required number of signatures needed to validate if enough signatures were collected to be considered representative of the ward. OP selects a random sample of signatures to be validated. Based on the number of valid signatures, OP's sole function is to conduct a statistical analysis to determine with at least a 95% confidence by ward and district-wide if a sufficient number of signatures was collected. OP then sends the results of the statistical analysis to the Board of Elections, which concludes OP's role in the process. OP has no authority to determine whether an initiative is ultimately included on a ballot. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We wanted to make sure that we put these points on the record. And of course, you were speaking very specifically about petition signatures that are collected for the initiative process. Am I correct? We do not do this kind of analysis for petitions for candidates. Am I correct? Ms. Phillips, can you hear me?
Right. So what OP does relates to petitions in terms of candidates. The Board of Election will probably be the best person unit to answer that.
Yes, exactly. But what I am asking, the work that you just described is done solely for and related to the initiative process. Am I
Yes,
correct?
that's
Okay,
correct.
okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, otherwise we might have a stampede of people who are running and said, wait a minute. Okay, I appreciate that. Just
Okay.
trying to, some of our processes we have discovered, and I think we'll hear through the testimony of Ms. Evans, who runs the Board of Elections, are a little complicated and we have many different processes. So I just want to make sure that the public is clear that this is what we are speaking of. Thank you very, very much. All right, we're still having a little audio problems. Please forgive us. We're trying to get through this. Statement. All right. When you do your analysis, I really want, I'm trying to get a copy of your testimony.
I believe it was sent in earlier from OP sometime earlier this week. I believe it came from Vivian Guerrero, who is our Chief of Staff.
Okay. So Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Okay, now you can, we are still struggling here. I'm so very sorry. And sorry also to you, Ms. Evans. It's just been unbelievable. Back in the day, when we didn't have modern equipment, we would say, we blame it on the rain. But I don't know what's going on, but we have been struggling to get this audio and video now apparently up. So thank you again. And my question was, based on what you had shared with us, Ms. Phillips, is that the collection of the information that you get from the Board of Elections is a review of all of the petition signatures. Am I correct that you use to base your judgment on?
Yes, the Board of Election will send us a petition initiative master file in Excel, and that's where we begin the process of the statistical probability distribution. So it's an Excel file that comes with the signatures on there. We do not see like original signatures collected on paper. It's a master file, and we take that file and then that file will have like a unit code, of course, and the ward where the petitioner lived. And we'll take that file, and the first step will be to draw the random sample. So that's how the process begins for the Office of Planning.
All right. And so your role is purely to do the count of the signatures by ward?
No, we do
No.
the we do the verification using the statistical model. We do not verify signatures that was submitted. We do not verify apparent signatures. Our role is basically 100% a statistical probability function.
All right. And so when you say that you are checking to make sure we have a valid number of signatures from each ward, what do you use? You use the address or the zip code, or what are you looking at in order to determine whether or not the person is in Ward 6 or Ward 7 or Ward 8 or?
The ward identification is already there in the file when we receive it from the Board of Elections. So we do not assign wards. It's already in the file that comes to us from the Board of Elections. We take that file and we begin the statistical process. And the first step is to draw the random sample, and we take it from there.
All right. And so when you get the file, your Excel file, it indicates the addresses attributed to a particular ward.
Yes, it will. Yes,
Okay.
it will.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your testimony. I just wanted to make sure everyone understands, you know, your small but very significant role. So thank you. And again, it's nice to see you from many years.
Yes. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Next, we will move to have a discussion with Monica Evans, the Executive Director of the DC Board of Elections. And Ms. Evans, I will swear you in, and also any of your staff that you would like. I think I see Ms. Stroud there with you, so I'll swear you both in. If you raise your right hand, do you swear and affirm that your testimony and any statements that you make before us today to be truthful and complete?
I do.
I do.
All right, thank you. And you may proceed. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Council Member. Good morning. Actually, before I begin my official remarks, I'd like to begin by sharing an additional statement for the record. The entire BOE family is brokenhearted right now. On September 4th, we lost an esteemed colleague, Robert T. Hunter, affectionately known as Reds. Reds worked at BOE for over 58 years. He eventually rose in the ranks warehouse operations. We have not experienced an election cycle without him. To provide context, since the enactment of the 23rd Amendment to the Constitution in 1961, the District of Columbia has participated in 15 presidential elections. Reds has been here for 14. I can't begin to tell you the impact he had on staff and the agency. The void is indescribable. His funeral service is tomorrow, September 27, and accordingly, our offices will be closed to allow staff to attend the service. 58 years of service to a single agency is quite an accomplishment. We want to ensure he is properly honored. Thank you for your indulgence. And now for my official testimony.
Well, Ms. Evans, I want to thank you very much for that information. I think it is very significant. You're right. I mean, for one employee to have that, continuation of service in our government and to our residents and businesses and institutions is really just outstanding. And so we share condolences with all of the members of the Board of Elections on his passing. And we are working on a resolution to honor the occasion that of his long history of work with the board. So thank you very much for that.
And thank you for your remarks.
Mhm.
Greetings, Chairperson Bonds and members of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor and staff. I am Monica Evans, the Executive Director of DC Board of Elections. With me today is Terry Stroud, the Board's General Counsel. As you know, Board of Elections, or BOE, is a charter independent agency, and our mission is to enfranchise eligible residents, conduct elections, and ensure the integrity of the electoral process. Planning for the 2024 general election is well underway. The general election is Tuesday, November 5, 2024. We have posted the draft general election calendar on our website. We have completed the nominating petition process, conducted the ballot lottery, and have finalized the ballot. We are currently conducting logic and accuracy testing of all voting equipment. During the 2024 election cycle, we were tasked with implementing new legislation. The Local Residents Voting Rights Amendment Act allows non-citizens to vote in local elections. This requires a BOE to make database modifications, create new educational materials, modify voter registration forms, and hire a dedicated multilingual staff person in our voter education and outreach division. We have also conducted internal training and modified training for our election workers. During the primary election, 115 non-citizens voted in the local elections. To date, 761 non-citizen residents are registered to vote in the District of Columbia. The Elections Modernization Act of 2022, or EMA, requires BOE to mail ballots for every election we administer, operate vote centers, and utilize mail ballot drop boxes. In order to properly administer the requirements of this act, we have created a mail ballot processing unit. We partnered with the Department of General Services to review location options for this unit. Mail ballot processing was conducted in our new space at 3535 V Street Northeast for the primary election. Please note, we did not receive all of the additional space that we were promised by June 2024. We desperately need more space ahead of the general election to efficiently perform our election responsibilities. Because we must be fully operational by the second week of October, we need to take possession of any new space by October 1, which is Tuesday, or as soon as possible to properly get equipment moved, calibrated, and tested. The Voter Education and Outreach Division administers year-round education, outreach, and engagement activities and programs. To prepare for the 2024 election cycle, VEOD registers voters and engages all eligible voters in the District of Columbia. Our education and outreach events also provide an opportunity for us to recruit election workers. Through our outreach efforts, we target special populations such as seniors, students, and those with limited English proficiency. Our outreach efforts include voter registration drives, tabling at fairs, and attending community events. We have begun our direct outreach to nursing homes, rehabilitation centers, retirement communities, and senior residential buildings. Additionally, targeted outreach regarding the Local Residents Voting Rights Amendment Act includes multiple touch points with non-citizens in the District of Columbia. BOE has participated in approximately 65 outreach events in September. We celebrated National Voter Registration Day on September 17 by partnering with Friendship Technology Preparatory High School, which featured the Metropolitan Police Department's side-by-side band, H.D. Woodson High School, Ron Brown High School, Carlos Rosario International Public Charter School, George Washington University, Howard University, and the District of Columbia, and University of the District of Columbia. Restore the vote. We routinely conduct outreach and provide educational materials to residents in Department of Corrections or DOC facilities. For the primary election, there were 477 registered voters in the DOC. A total of 257 DOC residents voted. This is an 18% increase over the 2022 primary election. All registered voters in the Department of Corrections will be mailed a ballot for the November general election. Vote centers will be set up at the 2 DOC facilities to allow in-person early voting. As we did in 2022, we plan to train and utilize incarcerated residents to work as election workers with the goal of providing a higher level of exposure and understanding of the electoral process. Election worker training will take place on October 16 for DOC residents. In-person early voting will take place from October 29 through October 31 in the DOC facility. Registration and outreach efforts in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, or BOP, occurs entirely via mail and email. BOE mailed packets of educational and voter registration materials to each facility for distribution by staff to the impacted residents. During the primary election, there were 1,069 registered voters in the BOP system. We received 373 voted ballots. This represents a 31% increase from the 2022 primary election. Technology enhancements. In 2024, we received funding to purchase additional mail ballot sorting and processing equipment. The new equipment provided sufficient efficiencies in processing and tabulating mail ballots. The new equipment allowed us to tabulate mail ballots faster and more efficiently. We've also received new ballot on demand or BOD printers for the November general election. Accessibility. We have begun conducting accessibility surveys of prospective vote centers for the 2024 general election. Once again, we are partnering with DGS to ensure that vote centers are structurally accessible. The ADA coordinator is working with our partners, such as Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services and the Office of Disability Rights to remediate barriers to accessibility that were identified during the 2024 primary election. Additional temporary ramps with handrails will be installed at certain vote center locations, and alternative entrances are being identified. Some mail ballot drop boxes are also being adjusted to enhance accessibility. We will also ensure that election workers are aware of the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA guidelines and are trained to promptly and effectively address issues as they arise. Voter assistance clerk training continues and will conclude on October 15th. Election Worker Division. The recruitment of quality election workers is important, and their presence at vote centers requires attention to detail. During the 2024 election cycle, our goal is to recruit and train approximately 2,000 election workers. We will deploy approximately 1,700 election workers to serve at vote centers. Election worker training began on Tuesday, August 13, 2024. We are offering training classes for registration clerks, ballot clerks, voter assistance clerks, site coordinators, and area reps. Classes are being offered 6 to 7 days a week for a 10-week period. To date, we have trained over 1,800 election workers. We are well ahead of schedule compared to the primary election. At this same time, we had only trained 1,553 election workers ahead of the primary. We have also partnered with 10 organizations that will adopt a vote center on election day. Mail ballots. As required by law, BOE will mail every eligible voter a ballot for the general election. Due to the passage of the Local Residents Voting Rights Amendment Act, we will also mail ballots that contain local contests to non-citizens. We plan to begin mailing ballots the week of September 30. In addition, we have already mailed 443 Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, or UOCAVA ballots, to military and overseas voters ahead of the September 21 deadline set forth in federal law. We also mailed 2,894 UOCAVA ballots. Mail ballot drop box and vote center placement. The board has 55 mail ballot drop boxes that have been placed throughout the city. The mail ballot drop boxes are scheduled to open on October 11th. We plan to operate 25 early vote centers and a total of 75 election day vote centers. Early voting will occur from October 28th through November 3rd, and election day voting will occur on November 5th. The vote center locations are posted on our website. Additional election planning information. I would like to add that there is an increased level of interest in the November general election. We have received an unprecedented number of outreach event requests. In September alone, we have participated in over 60 outreach events. We are receiving voter registration applications in record numbers. On a single day, we received over 1,870 registration applications. Due to an overwhelming response regarding election workers, we are no longer processing election worker applications for this general election. All additional applications will be kept on file for future elections. I say this because our staff members are working very hard. Many of them are routinely putting in 15-hour days. We have dedicated staff who are focused on getting the job done ahead of this historical election. I publicly want to thank each and every one of them on the record. In conclusion, as always, it is the board's goal to provide competent and responsive service to every registered voter in the District of Columbia. We will always review, modify, and adjust our processes and procedures wherever possible so that we improve our operations with each election. During this election cycle, we will pay particular attention to security and safety. As you know, we are working diligently to ensure we have a successful general election. Thank you, and we are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. And I find it chock full of good, thorough points that I believe that the public would be interested in. So the committee made a commitment, some time ago last year, 2023, that we would try to stay on top of the planning for the November election and in fact for the primary. So you're doing just that in providing us with the information. So thank you again. I wanted to just taking a quick look at your statement. I just had a few areas that sort of stand out. One, your outreach efforts, you indicated they include voter registration drives and, of course, attending community events. And then you did some outreach with nursing homes, rehabilitation centers, retirement communities, and senior residential buildings. 65 outreach events in September. And I just wonder, of those, do you have a list, or you can give us the number of nursing homes that you actually were able to speak with?
Absolutely. I can provide the breakdown to you, but
Okay,
do have information that includes the breakdown by high schools, adult education programs, Job Corps, universities, et cetera. So I can absolutely provide outreach to nursing homes, rehabilitation centers, et cetera. And we do have a schedule of all of those visits, so I can get that schedule to you.
all right. If we could get a breakdown of the places you have conducted outreach, that would be very helpful. And I have a question about the Senior Villages program that is sponsored by the Department of Aging and Community Living, DACL. There are 14 such groups scattered throughout the city, and I wonder if you've had the occasion to speak with any of those organizations.
Yes, we partner with all organizations that have touch points and contact with our special populations. And so we do reach out and we consider them partners in our efforts.
Okay, and so they would be included in your outreach list, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. And I wanted to ask about your efforts to promote, I guess, National Voter Registration Day on the 17th of September and the partnering with the schools. Is this the only time in which you made efforts to increase young voter participation in DC elections?
Absolutely not. Each month, we engage in routine education and outreach, and that always includes our high schools and universities. And we have made an additional effort to engage students in our student election worker program, because those 16 and older can actually serve as election workers, where they receive either community service hours, a stipend, or a combination of both.
All right. And so the goal of meeting with the high schools is really was to identify workers.
And to get them registered. For
Okay,
those students who are at least 16 years of age, they may pre-register in the District of Columbia. And then once they turn 18, they do not have to engage in additional steps. They will automatically be moved to our active voter roll.
all right. And when you say they do not have to do anything else, in other words, your programs are designed to register those that are eligible at the school setting. Is that what I'm
Yes.
hearing?
Pre-register at the age of 16. And once they pre-register, then they do not need to do anything to become an active voter.
All right. And so, but you do these activities at the schools, correct?
Yes.
Okay. just trying to, what I'm trying to do is to use your testimony to send the message that we are constantly trying to get more people on our rolls, and particularly focus on getting our young people engaged as early as is allowable. So thank you for that. The Department of Corrections, I'm noting that there has been some outreach there, and you're also actually have, I guess, identified some members of who are in the Department of Corrections at the jail that may actually be election workers. Is that correct?
That is correct. They would just be election workers for that particular facility.
Okay, so have you done any outreach to returning citizens who are not at the Department of Corrections? They're returning citizens. Would we find any of those individuals on your list of election workers?
I don't know that we track that specifically, but to answer your first question, we absolutely conducted outreach. We even have informational materials that are specifically geared towards returning citizens, just making sure that they update their voter registration once they return, particularly when their registration address is at a correctional facility. And so we make sure we engage with them routinely to ensure that they have the information they need.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for that. And then I wanted to, again, you indicated in your testimony that you work with on the issue of disability rights, and you have remediated barriers to accessibility that were identified during the 2024 primary, including additional temporary ramps with handrails, and you also made some adjustments to mail ballot box, drop box locations. Can you tell us a little more about that? I'm curious as to how many changes, location changes, did you have to make or have to modify, or what have you?
I can absolutely get you the number. I don't have the exact number of modifications made, but just to give you an example, with the placement of some of our mail ballot drop boxes, we have determined that some of them are not as easily accessible, or were not as easily accessible for those who were in wheelchairs. And so we have gone back just to ensure there is sufficient clearance so that that access is not hindered by anyone choosing to use our mail ballot drop boxes. And so I know one we looked at in particular that needed to be slightly moved was one at Eastern Market, but I can definitely get a list and let you know how many we had to adjust based on accessibility concerns.
All right, and has all of that work been completed so that you're comfortable that we have everything in place for early voting if people choose to do that, as well as for dropping their ballot off, as you say, in a conveniently accessible location in the ballot drop boxes?
It has not all been completed as of yet, but it will be completed well before the mail ballot drop boxes and vote centers open.
All right. And are you working with DGS, the Department of General Services, to make that happen, or are there other government agencies assisting?
Yes, we absolutely work with DGS. They have assisted with ramps in certain instances. And then due to some of the gymnasiums, there's often a center pole that narrows entryway into some of the locations. And so we've had to remove some of those poles to ensure that those voters who need wheelchair accessibility have that. And We're also working with disability rights at University Legal Services and the Office of Disability Rights to assist us with identifying modifications that need to be made.
All right, Ms. Evans, so I'm assuming that in order for this work to take place, there is a deliverable, some sort of plan where it specifies what you hope that would be the change, and some commitment from DGS that they can complete this modification by a certain date. Am I correct?
Absolutely. We have had a partnership that extends many election cycles. And I say that we have a very good working relationship. And so we have never had any issues with getting modifications made in preparation for early voting and election day.
Well, I appreciate that, and I don't doubt the great relationship that you have, but I am also very much aware, as you know, of the extreme delay that you are under in finding the suitable vote count center location, and it continues to be maybe not on the back burner, but it's moving forward, I believe. But given the track record, I'm just very interested in making sure that before we get to the point where you have your ballot drop boxes in place, that we know what we're going to have.
Absolutely. Our ADA coordinator and our logistics manager are currently evaluating and working with all of our partners to ensure that everything will be in place when drop boxes open and when voting begins.
All right. Then you mentioned that is this the individual you just spoke of who is your voter assistance clerk? No, that's different.
Our ADA coordinator is a full-time staff member, and he assists with ensuring that our vote centers are accessible and that they have language access that is needed, that our materials are in the proper languages, that we get sign language translators when necessary and other translations. So he ensures all of our language and accessibility needs are addressed. So he's responsible for overseeing that process. But in addition, we train voter assistance clerks to be present at each vote center, and they are specifically tasked with ensuring that each voter has whatever they need to be able to vote privately and independently.
All right, and so this training, you indicated, will conclude October 15th. What does it entail? How many hours of training? What are the parameters that we can ask of, I guess, voter assistance as it relates to some of the issues that we've heard of that happen in other parts of the country when it comes to assisting voters?
Yes, our election worker training is 4 hours, and we do have a quiz that must be passed at the end of that training. And voter assistance clerks are trained in our voting equipment because we do have accessibility features as far as being able to have the ballot read to you, their earphones. We do have poll pads that have language access on them, so they are able to assist with voters being able to communicate in their native language if they need any type of language assistance. Our vote centers that have high levels of non-English speaking voters, we deploy translators to those locations. And so they work with the voter assistance clerks. They ensure that Our voting equipment is adjusted so that it can meet the needs of those who need to vote from a wheelchair. So there are height adjustments that can be made on that voting equipment. And so our voting assistance clerks are well-trained in all aspects of making the voting process accessible to those who need any type of accommodation when they come to vote in person.
Thank you very much. I'm very interested in all of the information possible getting out to the public. I think we are hoping that we'll increase our usual turnout. Hopefully, there's a lot of attention given to this election. And as such, want to make sure that everyone knows how they can access voting in the District of Columbia. So thank you. You sounds like you've thought of everything, and I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
The duration of all of your election worker classes is about 4 hours with a quiz.
That is correct.
Okay. And you have recruited enough, so you're not, this is not a clarion call asking people to reach out to you if they want to work. You have enough.
That is correct.
Okay.
At this point, we're essentially keeping them on file for future elections.
All right, thank you. Tell us what will the ballot, the mail ballot look like if you are, that you will receive at your home?
Well, one thing that will be slightly different, our mail ballot packets have in the past been a purple color. And so to avoid confusion, because on occasion we've had individuals send a primary ballot during a general election cycle, the ballot for the general election will be kind of a goldenrod color instead of purple color as far as the exterior. And then that ballot packet will include a return envelope, a secrecy sleeve, the actual ballot, and then instructions for completing and returning that ballot. And one thing that's very important is for any voter to sign that ballot before putting it in the mail, because we do have 100% signature verification regarding mail ballots in the District of Columbia.
All right, and so the signature goes on the ballot return envelope, or does it go somewhere else? Where do they place their signature?
Once they vote their ballot, they will put it in a secrecy sleeve and then into another envelope. They will sign it once the ballot is put in, but you cannot view the signature from the outside of the envelope because we do have a secrecy sleeve or a little perforated sleeve that's over where that ballot is. Yes. So that flap can be removed once we receive it, but that just provides some privacy so that someone's signature is not visible when that envelope is going through the U.S. Postal Service.
Okay, thank you very much. And in this ballot, you indicated that you will have, I guess, a different ballot for non-resident voters. Is that correct? Or
For non-citizens.
what do we have?
Yes, non-citizen voters will receive a ballot that does not have any of the federal contests. It would just have the local contest, and that ballot is identifiable by an L in the upper right-hand corner to signify that it is a local ballot only.
All right, and okay, I got that. So when you do the messaging to the public regarding the election, what is the message? Is it just remember to vote, these are the dates, or is there something more? I mean, is there an explanation as to how, like you just chatted with me about how to handle the, mail-in ballot, or just what is the message?
Certainly. The first message is to check and update your voter registration information. And we really need individuals to ensure that their voter registration is accurate so that they are getting a mail-in ballot at their current address. There have been voters who they moved 3 years ago, they don't think about it, and then they want to know why they didn't receive their mail ballot, and it's because we don't have a current address on file. So the first message, of course, is to check your voter registration status. If they need to make updates, we provide information on how to make updates to that. So those are messages that we put out in addition to asking people about voter registration. We also put out the key election dates as far as when we will be mailing ballots, when mail ballot drop boxes open, and then the deadline for us to receive voter registration applications that are submitted by mail or online. We communicate the dates of early voting, election day, and the hours for individuals to vote. One of the things that's also very important, we ensure that we include contact information with whatever we put out there so that if there are questions, people will look at DC Board of Elections as the trusted source for correct information. So it is very important for us to ensure that any questions are answered by Board of Elections. We are in the process of finalizing our voter guide. And as you know, we do a voter guide for each election, primary and general, that we administer. And so that voter guide will have all of the key information that voters need to know in order to vote. And as you know as well, there are several ways to vote in the District of Columbia. We have postcard mailers that we send out. We also have educational materials, brochures, and flyers that contain this information. And as we've done for the last couple of election cycles, we will also put up yard signs so that we can ensure that we are addressing digital divide issues and putting things in different areas of the district. We utilize advertising on bus tails. We utilize advertising in Metro with live boards. We have print media in various local newspapers. We have television, radio, and another thing that we do to ensure we're reaching individuals in the District of Columbia who may not be registered, we do mail out an eligible but unregistered postcard to all individuals who are not currently registered, encouraging them to register and giving them the different methods by which they can register.
All right, well, you're saying you mail out a card to those that are not registered to remind them that they can register?
Yes, as long as they're eligible.
Yes, of course, as long as they're eligible. So where do you get that list? How is that done?
We work with Department of Motor Vehicles, and we work with our other partners to ensure that we have full lists, and then we're able to take the list of residents in the District of Columbia, see who is registered, and then, of course, looking at eligibility regarding age, et cetera, to ensure they're 18. And then we will send those mailers out once that list is combined. We do work very closely with Eric, our national partner, and they assist us with list maintenance and voter participation reports, and they assist us in compiling that list.
All right, and so really, I'm learning that if you live in DC somewhere, there is a likely chance that, or likelihood that you would have information that would inform you wherever it is, whether you have registered or not. I guess if you partake of any of our government services, you would have that information. So basically, not anyone in the district who considers themselves a resident can escape the opportunity to vote. You're going after them.
That is our goal. And we also work with voter registration agencies in the District of Columbia. And so when they provide services to district residents, they provide opportunities for them to vote at those agencies as well. So we really try to cast a wide net to ensure we meet and touch as many residents in the District of Columbia. And of course, just addressing the digital divide is also very important to us. And so everything is not just on our website or through electronic means, but we do understand the value in paper and mailings as well.
Thank you. So what percentage of your annual budget is devoted to outreach? Postcard, flyers, yard signs, newspaper, TV, radio. Do you have an estimate of what that is?
I can get that after we conclude an election cycle. We do prepare kind of a media report, and that outlines what we have spent on all of those methods of advertisement and outreach. So I can get that information to you. The media report, if you will, also has information regarding the number of touch points and the number of commercials, airings, all of that. So that is something that may be of interest to you. And so I can provide that to you.
Yes, thank you. I was just curious as to, across the board, many organizations, I know even in our daily life, we know that inflation has really escalated the cost of things. And I was just curious if there had been some escalation that you are aware of that you've had to deal with. So.
Yeah. But just as far as just a dollar figure, for the primary election, we spent about $200,000 in advertising.
Okay. And so you are spending more or less of that for the general?
Yes, we probably will spend a little bit more. And of course, we're reaching more people in the general election because with the primary, it's just geared to those registered with a major party. And so we increase our outreach efforts because more individuals are eligible to vote in the general election than the primary.
All right, well, thank you. Again, if someone has questions about their registration, how do they check it? Do they call the Board of Elections? Do they go online?
Yes, they can go to our website and check and just verify that everything is accurate with their registration. They are happy to call our offices as well. We are happy to assist anyone who needs to check that information. We know some people aren't as comfortable with navigating websites and technology. And so our key is to ensure that they do check. Even with our outreach materials, we include a QR code so that individuals can also go and scan that and access our system and check their voter registration that way as well.
So if someone has attempted to use the online system, putting in their name, their address, and even the last four digits of their social security, their date of birth, and 3 times it's come back saying you're not registered. What should they do? Call your office?
They can, yes, I would say
Okay.
absolutely call our office and we can find out what has happened.
Yeah, I was at a community event and a couple of people made the attempt, so much so that one of the persons there, gentleman, went home and got his voter registration card because he was being challenged. You're not registered. Look, see, you're not registered. You're not here. And he had indicated that he was a worker. Listen, I know my precinct. I've worked my precinct in the past for the board. And so he went home and he got his voter registration card, and sure enough, he is registered, but we couldn't get it to show that when he was trying to do. So I will, and I've told him already to please just be in touch with your office, but I thought you needed to know that that little glitch may happen from time to time.
Yes, and then sometimes people may have a voter registration card, but subsequent to getting that card, depending on the timing, they may have been moved to an inactive status. And so if you've been moved to an inactive status, when you check online, it will not be visible, but we can easily move you to an active status. And that happens through our list maintenance process that we conduct in odd number of years after a general election. So for instance, if you don't vote in a general election, we have a process where we do several touch points and reach out with postcard mailers, and we attempt to get people to verify their address. Sometimes it happens because people move, and we'll send a ballot or a postcard to an address and it's returned to us. And so that will also cause us to engage in the list maintenance process to determine if this is still a duly registered voter. And in some instances, when individuals do not reply, and then also we've had instances with U.S. Postal Service where we have received return mail that says no longer at this address or no valid address. And that also signals a process where they will eventually go to an inactive status. And so we're also working with the U.S. Postal Service to determine why they are declaring some valid addresses as invalid and returning mail to us. So that is something else that we are dealing with at this time.
Thank you. Can individuals who are not registered work for the board? Can they be working on this coming election, or have they worked in the primary election?
We encourage all of our election workers to be registered, but we only require our site coordinators to be registered.
Okay, thank you. If someone is not currently registered to vote, can they vote on election day?
We
And
do.
if so, what information or documentation do they need, if any, to do that?
Yes, for those not registered, they can register same day, either during early voting or on election day. They just need to provide proof of residence, and we have the documents that satisfy that on our website and at vote centers. And the event somebody still comes, they want to register, and they did not bring the appropriate resident documentation, they can vote a special or provisional ballot and then bring that documentation to cure their ballot, and then their ballot would still count. So we do encourage those who want to register same day to absolutely do so, and then they can vote at that same time.
All right, and so the information that is required, is it 2 pieces of identification or 1 piece or?
Well, it has to be something with their residential address. I believe it has to be dated within, is it 30 to, within 90 days. And it needs to have the current address. And so there are certain categories of what will satisfy that residential requirement.
All right, and can individuals who are registered who may want to do a change of address, can that be done during early voting at a polling site?
Yes.
Okay. Do we still have a procedure for absentee voting?
Well, technically, yes, because absentee voting is still in the statute if you look at it. But right now, everybody will receive a mail ballot as long as they are a registered voter and it is an election that we are administering. And so that happens bar none. And one of the things that previous absentee voters had to do that now people can do, they can include a mailing address in our system. And so for students or someone who is going to be away during election day, and when we mail those ballots, we ask for a mailing address and we can mail a ballot elsewhere. But for the most part, mail ballots have replaced what we traditionally called absentee ballots.
All right, and is there a deadline by which a student would have to notify the board and then the board would dispatch a ballot to the new address?
There is no definitive deadline. There have been anomalies, and we've had to get ballots to students or those who are temporarily in other locations. And so our goal is to make sure everybody who wants to vote is able and eligible to vote. We've had issues with USPS, and on occasion, we have had to suggest that people prepare to vote in person if they do not get their ballot by a certain time. But for individuals who are out of the DC area, we will make all attempts to ensure they get a ballot if they do not. And that has even included FedExing ballots to individuals to ensure that they are able to exercise their right to vote.
Okay, well, I'm rusty on the absentee ballot requirements, but if I remember, there was a time frame in which you had to get your request in, and so we'll just go to the law and assume that is the process that you invoke in order to make sure that a individual, perhaps a student or someone else who recognizes that they may be away on election day and therefore would like to vote in the DC general election.
Great.
Okay. Are there services available for non-English speakers who will want to vote, maybe using the Dropbox? Is there some language posted on the box that would tell them what to do? Or,
We have a lot of informational materials that we disseminate prior to mail ballot drop boxes opening. And so we publicize widely to those who may need help in a different language. And that would be for anything, not just mail ballot drop boxes, but if they need assistance with election day voting, however they need any type of help in ensuring that they're able to vote and they understand the process. We do have language line, we have interpreters, we have poll pads that house the different languages. So we, I think, have been pretty successful in reaching people where they are and getting whatever language interpretation services they need, regardless of what process or what point in the process of voting they're in.
Thank you. When we talk about getting out the vote and increasing the vote, and you are definitely doing your part trying to get people out for the election. I wonder, have you worked with the ANCs to disseminate information or to reach out to their 2,000 single-member district constituents?
Well, the first thing I'll say is we do not engage in get out the vote activities. And actually, any federal money we receive, we are actually prohibited from engaging in get out the vote activities. We focus on voter education and outreach. And there are certain areas of the city where we have to modify our efforts or increase our efforts to ensure awareness. But there have been, there's a school of thought when you engage in get out the vote activities that you are somehow trying to advantage a particular political party or a particular outcome. And then how are you equitable in your get out the vote activities? If you spend more time in a particular area of the city that may be known for voting a particular way, then it causes concerns for us. And so we are very clear to state that get out the vote is not what we do, but voter education and outreach and making sure that people are aware of the services we offer, how they can access those services, and making sure that as many people as we can reach get the information and as many touch points as we can make with individuals to ensure they have the information. That is our goal.
All right. So then I understand now clearly that you are not concerned with turnout. That is really the number of people who vote, or that those on the rolls come out and vote. You are concerned with making sure that everyone or anyone who wants to know the process, that they have that information.
That is correct. We are, of course, interested in as many people knowing the process and as many people accessing our services. And so we try to be very clear and get whatever informational materials out in the public domain so that people do exercise all of their rights and exercise all opportunities we provide. So, of course, we are happy when people engage in the process, but specifically get out the vote is not something that we focus on. But when voter turnout is good, that means that people are getting the information, they have the information, they are taking advantage of the services we offer. And of course, we see that as favorable.
All right, so any slogan that I see that says "Go vote," it did not come from the Board of Elections. It would be coming from any of the other organizations and groups around town or the nation that are saying "Go vote, go vote." I hear you. Thank you for that.
Prepared to vote. And so when we, say, vote, we're saying be prepared because that's the next step in registering, ensuring your registration is accurate. And then, of course, the culminating step in that is voting. So we want people to exercise the full range of what's available, but we do not focus on get out the vote.
All right. In some of the states, including Maryland and West Virginia, they have Election Day as a holiday. We do not in DC. But we do, as a government, require employees to provide at least 2 hours of paid leave so that individuals may vote. What do you think about that? Should we think about trying to have a holiday here in the district where everyone, again, this is get out the vote, encouraged to vote. Not saying vote any particular way, but would be to encourage people to come out and vote. And do you think that if we had the capacity, the ability to encourage everyone who worked in DC, who lives in DC, to vote, would we therefore see a tremendous increase in the turnout? And I ask because registration is usually around 400,000, which is interesting given that we're a community of 680,000, but 400,000, yet we are very excited when we get to 150,000 turnout.
Exactly. Well, first, I have not done any research as far as whether getting the day off to vote would increase or encourage participation. And as far as thoughts about whether it would do that, in my opinion, I try to stay away from opinions, and we, as you know, enforce whatever laws are in place. DCPS is closed on election day, which helps us as far as having access to those facilities for voting. But I really do not have an opinion as far as a holiday for voting, if you will.
Thank you very much. What are your basic security and safety measures in place at the various polling places for early voting and election day? And then if you could speak to the security or safety concerns, if there are any, related to the mail drop boxes.
Certainly. So one, we do have armed security at our offices and where we are processing ballots. And so that is something we do for the safety of our employees and those working with us during the election cycle. We also work with MPD. We coincidentally had a couple of meetings with them and with HACIMA this week regarding measures that we will put into place as far as safety, plain clothes officers, roving patrols around vote centers. We don't like to put a lot of specific information on the record regarding numbers and where they will be placed, because we don't want to feed any information to any potential bad actors. But we do ensure that we have a presence, whether it's known or unknown, at vote centers, because of course our goal is to make sure voters are safe. And during this election cycle, we are looking at beefing up those measures. As far as mail ballot drop boxes, we've been very intentional about the location and placement of those drop boxes. And so we have placed them in areas where there are security cameras, high traffic, and areas where there is regular surveillance of some sort.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I guess I'm thinking about today's community and how we are finding that there's been an accelerated interest in the general election period, and just curious about how we are preparing for things that we assume will not happen, but may happen if there is any security breach whatsoever. So I just want us to be able to assure the community that we're ready for any situation that may, or as many situations as possible that might present themselves on
Yes.
election day or through this process. I mean, I could sit here, we could have a chat and we'd say some crazy things that people will do, which we have heard about in other parts of the country. So I just want to make sure that the process that you have in place is very secure. People need not worry that, we're on top of this.
Yes, and just so you know, we do have partnerships with our local and federal partners. And even yesterday, I attended a top secret security briefing where we were provided some intel. And so we work with the FBI, we work with HSEMA, and we are constantly getting information about any credible threats. In addition to that, when things happen in other parts of the country, whether it's related to mail or any type of security concerns, we also look at our operations and we pivot and we develop additional SOPs, or we contract with additional security services to address any issues, even if they have not been identified in the District of Columbia, because of course we try to be more proactive than reactive in these situations.
All right, well, thank you. I do not want to in any way give an indication to the public or to media that we're thinking that something may happen, but I just wanted us to provide as much assurance as possible to the public. So I will not use various examples. We could talk about that. We won't do that, but thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. What is the current staffing level for the vote centers, including the number of volunteers? Is there a set number, or is it by size or previous turnout, or?
Yes, our numbers, we are between 10 and 12 election workers per vote center. During early voting, we have 2 shifts. And so we have a morning shift and an afternoon shift. During election day, it's 1 shift, and they remain on site for the duration of those operating hours of the vote center. And they are largely volunteers, but in addition to that, we have very experienced site coordinators at the locations, and then we have technicians, and the technicians are assigned a certain number of vote centers, and so they are available to travel between those vote centers to assure they are able to identify and address any technical needs or any issues at a vote center. So we have, I think, pretty much developed a system that works very well with seasoned election workers, newer election workers, and of course, our full-time staff.
All right. And is there any prohibition against neighbors preparing and bringing lunch or snacks to your volunteers at the election site?
I'm not aware of any prohibitions.
All right.
Well, what we do encourage is that that election workers should be prepared with everything that they need for the day, so that they should bring that because it's a long day, including any medication or things of that nature that they might need. But I am not aware of any prohibition against bringing food, but you always want to be prepared because you never know how the day is going to go. So anything could happen. So we want them to be prepared with whatever they need on site.
Yes. And election workers do work long days, and it's always nice when they're appreciated. And I think that one thing that is helpful, if anyone is planning to bring water or any type of appreciation to a vote center if they coordinate that with our offices, just so that we can ensure that the timing would be most appropriate when we're not in the middle of our typical rush times at vote centers, and that we don't have multiple groups focusing on the same vote center and they get inundated with treats, if you will. And then we have other vote centers where, as I say, they receive little love.
I appreciate that. And surely there are individuals, organizations who have suggested that they might have the capacity to bring treats, fruit baskets or whatever. They recognize that these are volunteers, although they are paid, but it's a stipend, and it's also public service that is greatly appreciated and sorely needed in order to make sure we have a fair elections process. So I'll try and get more information and be very happy to coordinate with you on that measure.
Thank you.
Mhm. Particularly when you have our high school volunteers,
Yes.
our young people, because in theory, they're missing their lunch and their programs at school. And we want to make sure that they're comfortable and that they will grow as voters and participants and volunteers, and you will have supervisors and tech leadership into the future from
Yeah.
their participation.
And just so you know, with our student workers, we do limit them to an 8-hour shift because those who are between the ages of 16 and 18 are underage.
Yes, thank you. The election worker protection temporary amendment that we did, Bill 25685, will expire on January 1. I was curious as to how these provisions are working. How do you anticipate them working? You find that that it will be easy to implement as we go into this rather thought of as a large election cycle and moving into the future?
The thing I will say, since 2020, there has been increased attention on elections in this country. And some of that is fueled with information that is not necessarily accurate. And there are issues that are very divisive issues, if you will, in this country. And so any efforts to protect election workers and keep them safe, or increased penalties for those who engage in any type of violence against election workers, I would say that that is something that is always needed and always appreciated. And so I really see that as something that we would like to see in place going forward when it comes to elections, particularly with the attention that elections now receive.
All right, thank you. And we will take your advice and try to get the legislation in a permanent form. Thank you very much. Ensuring the public's trust the results of elections is critical. And what options are available to members of the public who want to observe and monitor the elections process, including ballot counting after the election?
Yes, thank you. We make an effort to ensure that our processes are open to the public and transparent. We do put out press releases with information on how you can access those processes. So we are currently engaged in logic and accuracy testing of all of our voting equipment. That's open to the public. The press release, which is posted on our website, provides the information members of the public will need if they would like to come and observe that. you mentioned the mail ballot counting process. Again, that operation is open and available to the public. One of the things that we ask for people to contact us if they are interested in viewing that process, only because we have different shifts and sometimes our processing depends based on the timing of getting ballots from USPS on a given day and the number of ballots we receive. We don't have control over when USPS will deliver ballots to us. And so we often will process based on the delivery of those ballots. And we would hate for people to show up and there's nothing to view during the time that they come to the mail ballot processing center. So again, not an effort to in any way discourage people from coming, but we want people to come when there's something to actually view. We also have a post-election audit, and we put out a press release for that as well. And members of the public can come and view us conducting the post-election audit as well.
Well, thank you for that. As it relates to the mail ballot counting, when does that begin? When do you anticipate beginning that? I know you're saying that it's also a condition of whether or not you actually have ballots in-house, but is that usually 2 weeks before November the 5th, or is it earlier, or is it later?
We will typically start processing ballots in earnest around the second week in October. And I say process, but not tabulate. And so the processing is running the ballots through our election equipment, our Agilis machines, and that process will capture the intelligent mail barcode that goes into the tracker for those who have signed up to get a status update on their ballots. And so they will be able to see that the ballot has been received by us. We will go through and remove the signature flap from the ballots that come in and rerun those ballots so that our equipment can capture the signatures so that we can conduct the signature verification process. And we will begin just going through and verifying signatures and making sure those ballots are ready to be run. But as far as actually tabulating, that begins on election day.
All right, I wanted the public to hear that so that there's been some discussion about, oh no, they're going to have all of this ready. These 300,000 turnout numbers ready, and it'll all be done by 8 o'clock or 8:15 on November the 5th, because they have that magic equipment where you can just, and it's all done.
Jaquan, sadly, we do not. However, any mail ballots that are processed by election night, those will show up in the election night totals that we post. But the ballots that we actually receive at vote centers, as far as the mail ballots, because we do have drop boxes at vote centers, and ballots that we get from the mail ballot drop boxes, that processing will not happen on election night because, as I said, we have to, run them through our equipment, capture signatures, do signature verification. And so that is something that does not happen with everything we get on election night, because we can get up to 30,000 ballots on election night just collected from the mail ballot drop boxes.
All right, so if you are a voter and you go to a vote center on November the 5th and cast your ballot, that ballot is going to be counted and reported out in the election night count. Is that correct?
That is correct. Election night
Okay.
will include all in-person voting.
Okay.
With the exception of anyone who has to cast a special or provisional ballot. Those will not be included in election night totals because we'll have to go through the process of curing those before we can determine that they are valid and can be counted.
All right, and so therefore, the final outcome of the November 5th general election would be tallied and known 3 weeks after the election?
It may be known a little sooner. We can accept mail ballots through November 15th, as long as they were postmarked on or before Election Day, which is November 5th. And so we are still getting ballots, through that November 15th date. And so as far as having all ballots in hand, all ballots processed and tabulated, that would not happen until sometime after the 15th, because we would need to see what we get on that day.
All right. And so the post-election audits that are conducted to ensure accuracy, is that something that happens after November the 15th?
Yes, so
Or must it be requested by, let's say, a candidate?
Well, the audit is not requested. The audit we do automatically. The recount, if a candidate requests a recount, that is something that they would do. So,
And that would occur after the certification of the election results.
Okay, Ms. Stroud, you're saying, would you repeat again?
yes,
You cannot request a recount until after the certification, nor can you request judicial review until after the certification of the election results, because that's when the results are final.
Okay, all right. All right, I want the public to hear all of this. I know we're going into great detail as if we had just discovered the DC Board of Elections and their process, but I want it to be very clear to the public that this is the process that we use. And hopefully many of your questions, thoughts, concerns are being answered today, because we will not have an opportunity to examine the processes unless there is some sort of emergency or change of major change. We will not be able to do this again until after November the 5th.
Yes.
Just want to make sure that
yes,
hopefully we're getting all of your questions, and Ms. Evans is being kind enough to be here with us this length of time along with Ms. Strode. So we got a lot more questions, but and it seems very elementary, but we just want to make sure that, you can play this tape of today's roundtable again and again, and hopefully get all of the answers that you have been seeking, and, as you reached out to my office and asked this question, that question. So we decided we're going to put it all on the tape. So hopefully it's available to you.
Yes, and one final thing that I think is important to note, our website does have a landing page, kind of like a ready, set, vote with the information that any voter or resident in the District of Columbia would need as far as the election. In addition, our draft election calendar highlights all of the pertinent dates that would be of interest as far as the deadline for receipt of mail ballots, the deadline to cure mail ballots, the final count for mail ballots accepted that are special ballots or provisional ballots, the timing for the post-election audit, when a candidate can request a recount, and notations to DC official code are also included in this calendar. That does not mean we're not happy to answer questions or provide additional clarification as needed, but I did want to just let you know that we do make that information available on our website, so that in the event something's not covered today, there is a mechanism to get additional information. And then, of course, we're always happy to answer any additional questions.
Yes, and thank you very much for that. I'm treating today's roundtable as almost like a podcast, you know. People respond to some of these more modern approaches, and so that's what we're trying to do. Thank you very much for your time on that. There have been a few security-related concerns since the data breach in October of 2023. And looking forward, today included, what precautions has the board taken to prevent similar incidents?
Yes, so we have one thing in working with our vendors, we are assuring that they are deploying the proper security updates and patches. As you know, with any type of software or system, there are new security patches that address any threats. And so, with the incident that happened with us last October, we became aware that all of the security patches were not being deployed timely. So we do have a process for that. We also are undergoing annual penetration testing, and that is a particular process that we use to identify any vulnerabilities based on new threats or technology, because as I like to say, bad actors stay up very late at night and put in a lot of hours to try to develop new mechanisms to infiltrate systems. And so we engage in that penetration testing to be able to identify the security of our systems and processes. So we do have also some best practices that we have implemented based on other entities that have been breached. And I like to say, if you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you do not need to reinvent the wheel. And so organizations have reached out to us with things that they have put into place, and we have done that as well. Our Chief Information Security Officer has been corresponding with many organizations on a national level as well. We have regular meetings with, and also training and exercises with those partners, and tabletop exercises to help us identify ways that we can ensure that our systems and our information is as secure and protected as it can possibly be. One of the things that we were told in just our conversations with Octo, you know, your systems are safe and secure at any given moment of time, but because bad actors are constantly reinventing and inventing ways to gather information and to act in ways to engage in ransomware attacks, et cetera, there's always something new on the horizon. And so you don't know what's coming, but as soon as it's coming, it's very important for us to be in a position that we're able to address any concerns as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And so now that we are actively engaged in those reviews, we are confident that we are putting systems in place to address any future breaches or security concerns.
Thank you for that. And I therefore am assuming that you are continue to utilize the same vendor that you were using at the time of the breach. I guess because that vendor was also the vendor for the FBI that was also breached. So am I correct in assuming you're still with that vendor?
We are still with that vendor, and because of the timing of the 2024 election cycle, we did not have sufficient time to explore the possibility of a search RFP process going through procurement to identify another vendor. We were in a position where we had already started planning for the 2024 election cycle. And in order to not jeopardize our systems being so close, we had to make the decision to remain with that vendor. But of course, we are fully intending to explore all of our options after this 2024 election cycle.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. The board holds regular board meetings that are open to the public. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay, are all of the board meetings open to the public?
Yes.
Okay, and did you have a board meeting on September the 3rd, or is there one coming up in October?
We have monthly board meetings, and so our October board meeting will be Wednesday, October 2nd. Our September board meeting was Tuesday.
September 3rd.
Yes, Tuesday, September 3rd.
Okay, thank you. And now, big question, when will your board meeting be in the month of November?
Well, it would typically be the first Wednesday, but I think, have historically during the month of November when we've had elections, not had them until we certify. And our certification date is tentatively scheduled for December 2nd, or that first Wednesday. Well, actually, December 2nd would be the date that we are tentatively scheduled to certify the election results. And I think that's a Monday, because that will be post-audit. The soonest date after we are scheduled to conclude the audit that would occur. And so we would cover all information to date at that point when we certify the election results.
Yes, and being
All right.
to the general election, we, as General Counsel indicated, combined the November and December board meetings for that December date.
Okay, so we can expect a meeting on December the 2nd, and at that time, or a week later, when we would have the certified results.
No, if we have the meeting on December 2nd, that's when we would certify.
Yes.
Okay, so December 2nd. All right,
Tentatively.
thank you. I understand that you are transitioning from .org to .gov, G-O-V. And this is important decision that you've made. Do you have a timeline for your transitioning to .gov, G-O-V? I know it's going to happen after November the 5th.
Yes, absolutely. After this election cycle, we will begin January 2025 in earnest. Of course, there are costs associated with that migration as well. And so we will likely submit an enhancement request to see if we can get some financial assistance to help us with that endeavor. But we have started having some conversations and reaching out to other organizations that have gone through the migration from a .org to a .gov or .us to a .gov or what have you, just to make sure we are developing good checklists to ensure that we are considering everything that needs to be considered as far as upfront steps, but then also with any communication we need to conduct. And then, of course, as you know, having been through that process, there will be a period of time where both platforms will be accessible until we're able to solely rely on the .gov.
All right, and can you just share one or two of the reasons why this transitioning is being done? I mean, is it about public trust? Is it about bringing the Board of Elections with, as you said, is a chartered entity of the District of Columbia government into the light years of being a part of the government, or just what's going on?
Yes, we do maintain to be the trusted source as far as elections, and there are additional security aspects that pertain to having a .gov domain. First of all, you have to essentially be vetted to get a .gov domain. And so as a private citizen, I cannot just go and get that type of domain. And so there are organizations out there that are recreating kind of spoofs of legitimate websites to drive traffic to those sites and driving traffic away from the legitimate site. And so this would prevent kind of an alternative site from popping up that and somehow represents itself as Board of Elections and putting out mis or disinformation. There are also security measures that come along with the .gov. And so all of our federal partners, Homeland Security, CISA, FBI, it is a best practice to migrate to a .gov so that, one, you can be assured of being the trusted government source, but then also it would help to prevent some of those bad actors from hacking sites, and then also providing duplicate sites in order to misinform the public.
All right, thank you. You mentioned in your, in I guess answering some of the responses to your testimony, you mentioned the inactive voter, the active voter. Can you describe the process for checking registration lists and how a voter is determined to be, let's say, inactive?
So for instance, if someone does not vote in a general election, we have a series of mailers that we send out. And we also have a series of a process for returned mail. And so essentially, we have a mailer that is non-forwardable and a mailer that is forwardable. So there are kind of two ways for us to enter the process. So if we send a ballot to someone and that ballot comes back to us, ballots are not forwardable. And so that can be considered that first mailer if we get a returned ballot in the mail that is not deliverable. But then they would be on a list of voters that received a first ballot. Anyone who did not vote in a general election, we would send a mailer to them. If that ballot is returned, that too is considered that first mailer. We ask for a response. Anytime we do not get a response, or if that mailer is returned, we will send a second mailer that is a forwardable mailer. And so we are always trying to update voter information registration. You do not have to vote. And so if we send a mailer to someone who did not vote, they can send that mailer back. It's like, yep, that's me. You have my correct address. And that's all that we require. But after a number of attempts to get in touch with someone or returned mail that comes back with us not being able to verify that it's a valid voter, that voter is moved to an inactive status for 2 election cycles. And then that inactive voter is eventually removed from the voter roll. The good thing is, even if you are in an inactive status, that does not prevent you from voting. If you show up and you're in an inactive status, by voting, that will place you back into an active status.
Okay, that's good to know, because I was, reading a little bit about Judicial Watch, an article they did last year, speaking about the 65,000 ineligible names that you removed from the voter rolls. They say, of course, the article says only after being prompted to do so. And I guess I'm a little concerned because I used here today, you know, a number like more than 400,000 that are on our rolls. And we customarily get not even 50% of that as a turnout. And I just wonder how are we treating these individuals? Clearly, these individuals, some may be inactive. I guess you can, let me ask, can you, would your name appear on the registered voter list if you're classified as inactive? And you said inactive, there are two national or two general elections where the individual had not participated.
Yeah, so if you ask for a copy of our voter roll, if you're inactive, you'll just get a copy of the active voters. So that will not show up on the list of active voters.
All right, and so
So for
inactive doesn't necessarily mean that you are ineligible. So these 65,000 names were ineligible. Tell us what would make you ineligible.
when you say ineligible, can you just clarify?
Well, the article indicates that you removed over 65,000 ineligible names from the voter rolls. And I'm trying to understand what
Okay.
was the criteria for removing these names.
Okay. And it's some of it is just terminology. And so with certain articles, they refer to things in ways that we don't. So thank you for that clarity. And so what they are saying when we removed eligible names, those are individuals who were primed to be moved from an active status. And we did have a delay, not after the most recent election cycle, but the election cycle prior in 2020, some of those names were not removed as timely as they should have. And so that is what prompted the Judicial Watch action. We did not have that same occurrence after the 2022 election cycle when we engaged in the list maintenance process. And all of those individuals were moved to an inactive status timely.
All right, and so in the 2022 election, the city showed a registration of what? This is our general election.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I'm just trying to look at the numbers. In 2022, the general election registration roll was what number?
2022. I don't have all of that in front of me. Just a moment. Let me try to find that for 2022.
And is there a particular month?
And are you specifically asking around election time of 2022?
Yes, just trying to understand the numbers. You just pointed out that the 65,000 include individuals that were not removed in time in the 2020 election. And these were individuals who had moved or were basically you're calling them inactive, correct, as opposed to ineligible.
That's correct. And I'm on my phone. I can't pull up that data right now.
Okay. Okay, we are showing on the internet is 504,815. And so in 2020, we're showing, waiting for that number. Okay, in 2020, we're showing 517,890. And I'm just wondering, where do we find the 65,000 that you're indicating? The terminology ineligible really refers to those who were inactive.
Right. Just a moment. I'm trying to pull that up.
We have information from the last one.
Yes, because I, in my ED reports, I have provided information about the total number of voters, the total number that were moved to an inactive status, and so that is what I'm looking for, and I can give you.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
So on our website, it has the number of voters, but we have additional information that refers to our list maintenance processes and the number of people who were removed. And I'm trying to get that report now.
All right. Well, we see on the on your website the voting age population and then the total that are registered. And those are the numbers that I was just reciting. And then we see the turnout, and the turnout is a composite of the registration. And if the registration is inflated, then our turnout numbers, would be different. But that's another story. Right now, I'm just trying to understand how do we count these 65,000? I'm sure that some would have become active between 2020 and 2022. I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah. Although the numbers show less, I mean, really and truly, it shows a drop in the actual participation or the actual eligibility.
Yes. And let me see if I can pull this up quickly.
In fact, it shows 13,075 of a difference from the you have less, it shows a minus of only 13,075. So I could therefore assume or estimate then if we deduct for the 13,075 from the 65,000 that were put in active status, we still have quite a few people that were maintained on the rolls and that are not participating, I guess is what we're trying to account for.
Yes. And just to provide some additional information for the
52,925. Yeah.
So the numbers that are provided from Judicial Watch are as a result of the 2020 election cycle, and we can help you decipher those numbers. But just to give you an example of our list maintenance process post the 2022 election cycle, as I mentioned, we sent the non-forwardable postcard or first mailer, and that could be a return ballot or other piece of non-forwardable information. And then the second forwardable postcard that was sent, we prior to December of 2023, we actually removed 65,544 voters from our voter rolls. And so I think that is close to the Judicial Watch number. And then in December, an additional 37,962 inactive voters were removed as a result of our list maintenance process. And so then based on reports that we received Regarding deceased voters, we removed an additional 5,192 voters. And so in total, we removed 108,698 individuals from our voter registry in 2023. And then we moved another 92,772 active voters to an inactive status.
Wow. So if I do the math, are we saying that of the registration rolls today, which are, we don't have the registration roll as of 2020? Okay. I'm
Well,
sure the rolls have gone up. So let's say we now have a registration of 600,000 of that. Are we saying that approximately 200,000 are now inactive on the rolls based on the action you took in 2023 and then the additional 65,000 and then the 5,192 most recently moved to inactive status?
right. And to be clear, all voters are not removed as a result of our list maintenance process. There are voters who move, and so they provide information that they've removed to another jurisdiction. And so there are other ways that people are coming off of our voter rolls. But as of today, total registered voters is 442,079. So that is our current number of active registered voters in the District of Columbia. As far as inactive, we have a total of 162,962 inactive voters, and that's as of today.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I guess for me, I'm very curious because when we as residents see the numbers posted, let's say in other parts of the country in particular, you know, they have the little chart and they say what's the turnout and what have you. I'm just curious about how we identify turnout in the district. And if we are basing our turnout on registration, which includes the four, I guess at this point in time, it would be 442,000. And if we know that we have an additional 162,962 that are sort of waiting in the wings that may decide to vote, some of them at least, it makes it hard to understand what is our real turnout in our city. And I wonder if, you know, just I wonder out loud if some of the other states, or yes, some of the other states are having that kind of problem as well, or what do they base it on?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons it's really important for us to engage in the list maintenance process, because we want to make sure we are painting as accurate a picture as possible. And so our data services team really did a great job post the 2022 election cycle in ensuring that all of those mailers were processed and all of those voter records were updated. And that is what is required in order to move people from an active to an inactive status. And then, of course, those who are positioned to be removed altogether from the voter registry.
Well, thank you so much. Let's talk a minute about Eric. I think DC has been a member since really 2015. Can you tell us what Eric provides for our board of elections?
Yes, well, of course, Eric assists us in the process of working with other Eric members to get information regarding double voting. And so through the Eric process, we're able to identify individuals who potentially voted in the District of Columbia and also another jurisdiction through the ERIC data we received. And then we're able to work with those jurisdictions. And in some cases, we've had to refer individuals for prosecution based on the information that we have that pointed to the fact that they potentially voted in multiple jurisdictions. We also get voter participation reports from ERIC, and we get information that allows us to send information regarding eligible but unregistered residents in the District of Columbia so that we can send those EBU mailers. And so ERIC is a nonpartisan organization that really looks to ensure that we're able to make sure our information is accurate and make sure we're able to have a national platform where we are able to work with other member states to share information and possibly identify fraud, if you will, in those instances where someone may have double voted.
Okay, double voted. I know that Eric can find duplicate registrations. Have we had the occasion for that find here in the district?
Yes, we use ERIC. All the information we get from ERIC, we use to update our voter registry and to engage in our list maintenance process. So any way we get information that suggests something is outdated or needs to be updated, we absolutely use that in our process to keep our roles as up to date as possible. Of course, that is a huge task being in the District of Columbia because in the DMV, we are a very transient jurisdiction, if you will, and people move within DC and within, DC, Maryland, and Virginia quite frequently. And so one of the things that always helps us with that process is when individuals kind of put their voter registration on the same list that they have when they're moving, when they are transferring utilities or transferring their vehicle registration. If people would just kind of have it front of mind to update their voter registration, that would assist significantly because as I mentioned, the process of moving someone to an active to an inactive status and then completely removing them from the rolls, we have to go through certain steps, and those steps take time. But if voters are proactive and update that information directly with us, then we get more accurate voter rolls more quickly, and it helps us to streamline the process.
Okay, so then when we were just talking about you now have 162,962 persons listed as inactive. I suppose that to me, that means that approximately 30,000 of those that were identified in that, I believe it was, I think, 100 and, well, almost 200,000 when we did the accumulation of what was extracted in 2020, 2022, 2023, the 108,698 and the 91,772. It must be about 30,000 that were inactive but became active. I guess they responded with a change of address, or if they had moved out of the city, they moved back in the city. How do we?
I'm not sure I completely followed your math, but to answer the question, there are always people who somehow become inactive and then they can become active again. So they can become active by reaching out to us and indicating that their status should be active. Sometimes they go and check their voter registration. They see they're not on the rolls. We'll go and see that they are inactive and we can move them to an active status. And then by showing up to vote, if they show up to vote, then that too would trigger us moving them from an inactive to an active status.
All right. And so, I know that Eric also helps you identify voters that appear to have voted more than once in, let's say, in DC and another jurisdiction. Is that a situation perhaps where a student voted during the primary in the district, but then in the general election would be voting in, let's say, Arkansas where they're attending school? Would Eric pick that up?
No, we're looking at individuals who voted twice in the same election. And
All
so
right.
there are potential hits, if you will, with an individual who potentially voted in DC in another jurisdiction. We get that information, the other jurisdiction gets that information, and then we have a process where we share information to one, determine if it is the same person. In some instances, you may have someone with the same name and you have a junior and a senior, and they don't go by junior, senior necessarily, but we do our research, we find out that it is not the same person. And so when we get that initial information, we do not initially and automatically act on it until we have that level of engagement with the other jurisdiction to determine if it is something we need to pursue further.
Okay. And how quickly do we hear from Eric or have access to Eric's report following an election? Is it a year later or months later or weeks later?
Already requested voter participation reports for the general election. And so, no, it's not a year later. I'm trying to think of the exact time, but it's early. It would be early in 2025 that we would receive that information from Eric.
All right. And it also tracks voters who have died, correct, or passed?
Well, we have a number of different ways. One, in working with government agencies, and we have a contract or MOU with the Department of Health. And so we do get information regarding deceased individuals.
All right. Well, I'm thinking, let's say an individual is a DC registered voter. They, let's say, pass away in a Maryland or West Virginia nursing home. Would the DC Health Department have that information?
We, in addition to working with DOH, we also work with national databases to get information. And so it's
All
not
right.
through DOH. So we are able to get that information regardless of where someone dies.
Yes, thank you. I'm concerned. I've gotten a little inquiry about that from persons who are worried about, fraud, how their social security number is used. So I was just curious. So thank you very much for those responses. Are there any potential issues that have been identified as it relates to security in the rolls and registration from the primary election that come to mind?
I wouldn't say there's anything that I can think of that has come to light, particularly things that were identified in the primary that have, been placed on our radar screen to be addressed during the general election.
All right, thank you. And, the other part. As you mentioned, as was mentioned earlier, the November ballot voters will have an opportunity to vote on an initiative, and I think you've dubbed its titled or commonly referred to as I-83, which contains two provisions, one relating to ranked choice voting, another related to how primaries are conducted by the parties. Can you quickly describe the role of the board played in preparing the title and the legislative form of the initiatives?
Sure. I'm going to let my general counsel take the lead on it. But, there is a process that we follow, and that process is in accordance with DC official code. And it gives us particular steps that we go through to determine proper subject matter, to assist with proper title. And then once we receive a petition, then we have certain requirements that are deadline specific as far as when we need to determine accurate numbers as far as signatures. And then, as we heard from Dr. Phillips earlier, their involvement with the process once we determine minimal signature thresholds are met. So I'm going to turn it over to General Counsel Stroud.
Yes, so the board's role with respect to the formulations, which you specifically asked about, is that we notice a public meeting after the measure has been accepted as presenting a proper subject. And the purpose of this meeting is to formulate. The board begins with its set of formulations, and then members of the public, including the proposers and any opponents, have the opportunity to weigh in so as to ensure that the formulations accurately and in a non-biased way reflect the legislative text of the measure. And that is what happened with respect to initiative measure number 83.
Okay, can you clarify, voters must vote yes or no on the entire proposal, or can they vote yes on one part, no on the other part, or yes on both parts? How is the initiative being presented on the ballot?
The way that the measure was presented by the proposers meant that there were two items that they will vote collectively up or down on. So that is the way that the measure was presented. And that is, the board has no discretion to alter that. And so that is the way the voters must vote on it. They will either vote for the entire measure or they will vote against the entire measure.
All right. I have questions here that I don't think you're interested in. Does the board publish guidelines on the requirement for each of these measures?
There is a page on the board's website that discusses and outlines the steps in the initiative process, yes.
Okay, so if there on your website, you have articulated what a yes vote or what a no vote or what either vote would do in the community.
Well, we have all of the materials related to this initiative on the website. It's also being, if it has not already been published, in newspapers of general circulation. So the public is aware through efforts of the board to inform the public as to what the import of the measure is.
All right, now it's my understanding that the measure, okay, we'll call it the measure, which has two parts, is more than 2,000 words, and it requires understanding of at least 11 different definitions. And I mention that, or I'm pointing this out because 2,000 words is a lot of words for a ballot, where customarily
entire legislative text of the measure will not appear on the ballot. It's a summary statement. It's a short,
Ah, I see. So the whole proposal will not appear on the ballot.
no, it will not.
All right, and so therefore, it is your interpretation of what this legislation does that will appear on the ballot, and approximately how many words is that? Because you know, we only do a 10-second quick read of most things.
Okay, and that's correct. I mean, well, I'm not making a comment as to whether or not a 10-second quick read, but the entirety of the measure is published again on the board's website. It is published in the DC Register. It will be published in newspapers of general circulation. And so the entirety of the legislative text, including the short title and summary statements, are available for the public pursuant to existing law. The board did what it was supposed to do, and more with respect to making the public aware of the entirety of the measure. But what goes on the ballot is the short title and summary statement.
Okay, so the short title and then the summary statement. Okay, so, and I'm very clear on what that language is. So the text of the legislation will not be featured on the ballot.
That is correct.
Okay, okay. All right, that helps with some of the confusion that, of course, we've been hearing about. I also want to inquire about the fact that the measure is in the Court of Appeals, and they have indicated they will hear the measure in October. And I know you were up against the deadline of the 13th of September for placing measures on our ballot. Was there any thought given to holding this particular measure until we heard from the courts, since the courts have the final say in the District of Columbia on these matters?
No, there was not. That is not the course of action that is appropriate. And I mean, I will just say with respect to these matters, because we are actively litigating two cases regarding Initiative 83, and I report on these at the meetings. We are actively defending these matters. And so there's, not too much that I would like to say regarding beyond what I would report at a board meeting, because, again, we are in active litigation with respect to these matters. But no, there was no thought to not placing the measure on the ballot until the matter was resolved.
All right, and so is there a record where the board voted to move ahead, or was that issue brought to their consideration?
What question in particular are you?
I'm trying to understand, you have just, made it clear that there was no, I guess there was no, at least I think I'm hearing that there was no official decision made since the board, the 3-member board makes the decisions that are implemented by the staff. And I'm trying to understand if the board made a decision that this measure, which is before the Court of Appeals, that it would go on the ballot at this time before October, when the court will conduct its hearing or is scheduled to do a hearing.
There was no basis upon which the measure should not have gone forward. The measure was found to constitute a proper subject. The measure was found to have the appropriate number of signatures. So by virtue of the decisions that were made by the board, there was no basis upon which not to move the initiative forward.
So, all right, and so the board did in fact vote on the fact that it had the proper language and the proper signatures or the correct number of signatures.
Yes, yes, we followed the process that was in place. And so everything that was done is in accordance with DC official code and next steps. And so you mentioned, was there a thought to not put it on the ballot until after the court decisions were concluded? And that is not the process as it is laid out.
All right. I am asking this question upfront because you know there's a lot of discussion in the community. Well, you may not know, but there is. And we get bombarded with these questions. And so I wanted to make sure I put on the record the position that the board voted on. That is very important because that is their responsibility to vote on these measures. So forgive me for being, a little testy here, but, I really need to have that information out in the public domain so that we can close that loop and move forward.
So to answer that question, the board did two things. The first thing that the board did was based on its own research and the advisory opinions that were received determine that the measure was a proper subject. And having done that, it set off to formulate and move the process forward. And then when a petition in support of the measure was submitted to the board processed it and determined that there were enough signatures for the board to be placed on the ballot. And so,
all right. So, I think I'm understanding. So the board, based on the general processing that they do, they understood that the measure would be placed on the ballot because it had met its requirements, and that is, the appropriate number of signatures and proper language. And am I correct on that?
that is correct.
Okay, but there was no actual formal vote that said or had anything to speak to whether or not the measure would, there was consideration that the measure was under consideration by the Court of Appeals.
The board is aware that the matter is being litigated.
Exactly, but they did not vote to say, okay, it's being litigated, and therefore we'll wait for our boss, the Board of Appeals, to make a decision before we move forward.
There is no authority for the boards not moving forward with processing a measure that has been found to have been supported by a sufficiently numbered petition.
All
And
right. And that's what I wanted to, we need to have that on the record. The procedures and timelines for initiatives, referendums, and recalls are different. Can you tell us a little bit about, for instance, the recall? Because we had a few concerns about that this year. There were some formulations of recall efforts.
Is there a particular aspect of the process that you're interested in knowing about, or?
Well, really, since it's different from the initiative, and I think most people are aware of the signature process and the proper language which you described, and so wondered if that is what happens with the recall as well.
Well, they're different measures. And so the effort with respect to the recall is when you are trying to remove an elected official from office. And the signature requirements are different. Even within the initiative and referendum context, the timing is different. So they are voter-initiated programs, but they differ in various ways. So I'm not sure
Okay.
what the
So the
specific,
timing and the signature requirements are different from the initiative that you described.
yes, the
All
signature
righty.
for recalls, you need 10% of voters in the particular electoral jurisdiction. For initiatives, you need 5%. Yeah, there's depending on,
Okay.
you might be talking about their different processes.
All right. Okay, and I guess they're different also for the referendum process.
Well, yes, because the initiative process is one in which you are trying to propose a law, and the referendum process is one where you're trying to stop a law from becoming law that the council is taking action on or attempting to move forward with.
And you say the referendum is to revoke the law?
So the council, the people through the referendum process are looking to stop action with respect to a law that the council is attempting to move forward. And so the people are attempting to hold a vote on that particular law.
All right. Yes, I just I want it real clear, so that, you know, the demarcations are clear and people know what we do and what the options are in our government. Just one section. Oh, in regards to I-83, and this is an issue that I think you might want to give me some thoughts on. One of the issues that opponents have raised is that they had 10 days to file a challenge to the legislative form. In this case, the challenge was filed after the board posted the form to their website, but one day before it appeared in the DC Register. Does the Board of Elections post a calendar of important dates related to the timing of petitions and challenges?
So the triggering date for the challenge, the 10-day challenge period that you speak of, is when the measure is posted in the DC Register.
All right. And does the board have a sense of what it really took to examine a number of petitions that far exceed the required number of signatures? I'm thinking also about the initiative. We have read in the media that there were, I think, 40,000 signatures filed with the board, and the filers indicated that at least 30,000 they knew were valid, that they were signatures or addresses and signatures that could be checked. And I think the requirement was more, as you say, was 5% of the registered voters. So that is quite a few more signatures. Is there something that we need to look at as it relates to the volume of signatures versus the amount of staff and staff time to check, and whether or not 10 days, 30 days is appropriate for reviewing this?
Well, one thing I will say, I do believe we need to look at the timelines and explore what is entailed in reviewing this number of signatures. For instance, we received 8,528 pages of signatures for when these petitions were filed. And so because we have a number of days to determine if it meets the number threshold. And then after just meeting the basic number threshold, then we have to determine the number of valid signatures. And so we had to have well over 30 people reviewing signatures in order to make these determinations as far as valid signatures. And when you have, limited resources and time deadlines, we were working 7 days a week, and we had to bring in extra people to assist us with this endeavor. And so I do believe that looking at the timelines that are currently in place is something that we need to do, because it makes it very challenging, particularly when we are in the midst of an election cycle. And so there is day-to-day work that needs to happen as well. And to review this number of signatures by the deadlines, it's just a huge undertaking. And, I want to commend staff because we did it, we made it happen. But given the sacrifices that people had to make to their families, the sacrifices people had to make with the incredible amount of overtime and the weekends that we had to sacrifice in order to get this done, it really interfered with, I would say, work-life balance, but then also with what we had to do just in the normal course of an election cycle.
I thank you very much, Ms. Evans, for that. And I too want to commend your staff always for the Herculean job that they do. And certainly when you just think 8,500 plus pages, that's phenomenal that you could get through all of that. And I just want the public to understand it is not there's no budget process where you can just look up everything instantaneously and move forward. Now, I think for the initiative process, as well as for recalling, that there is a check on that the board does a check of every signature. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and which is different for when, for candidate, when candidates are running from the wards and at large, I think you only check those names, signatures, addresses when there is a challenge. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Is there some specialized training that your staff has to succumb to in order to do the signature verification process?
With everything, we have best practices and tools we use to look at signature verification. It's not just with the petition signatures, but also with signatures on ballots and the signatures that we have on file for various voters. So as far as an official training they go through, I don't know what classifies as official, but there is guidance that is shared with staff and things that they are to look at to ensure that they are making good decisions and sound decisions when looking at signatures.
All right. And well, to that note, is there any requirement for specialized training for your general personnel?
If you could just clarify when you say specialized training for general personnel.
Well, I guess given you've shared that you have many many sources by which you can develop a perspective list of voters, And it seems to me, confidentiality, would stand out. I would also, for me, it would be important to know if people are neat in doing their work, particularly if their work is some of their work is manual and things like that. So it really, I don't know what the solution would be, or what I'm not thinking about anything in particular other than just wondered if there was some specialized training or orientation that is performed for anyone who is working in your domain.
Yes. Well, we do have standard operating procedures, and depending on what people are working on, everybody does not have the same access to information and material. So it's based on the need of your position. But then we do have safeguards in place regarding protecting PII or personal information. And so there are protocols in place to ensure that we are safeguarding information and material, and that we are using that material only in a professional way in accordance with our job duties and responsibilities.
All right, well, thank you for that. Are circulators allowed to amend or edit any of the entry if, let's say, someone at all on the a petition form? That's a question that we had gotten.
Generally speaking, no. There is, it depends on what the specific alteration is. If it is to change information, or if it is to, if you could provide some context. Generally speaking, the answer is no. You're supposed to fill out the circulator's affidavit under penalty of perjury and things of that nature. Now, you might, if you wrote the date incorrectly and you want to go back and change it, you could probably alter that and initial it just to indicate that there's an amendment. But typically speaking, no.
All right, well, thank you for that. I know that from time to time, individuals will say, I live on A Street to Southeast, forget to put the house number in, and then the circulator will say, well, I'm in front of 1210. I'm putting 1210. You just came out of that door, and they'll put it on there. Or at least that's what has been said. And then there are other situations where you will ask someone to sign, and they sign and they forget to put their address. So then you, the circulator, you go and you find out what the address is from your voter registration list that you have. And so you write it in. I'm just wondering, what does the affidavit really mean? Does it mean that once a individual signs within those boxes and puts down an address, that is sacrament? Or does it mean that it can be cleaned up in some sort of way before it gets to your office for bona fide checking?
Yes, whatever the voter puts on that petition sheet is what we consider voter intent. And so that is sacrament, if you will. The examples that you mentioned just briefly would be examples of things that would be impermissible. If I signed a petition and I forgot to put my address, and the circulator says, oh, that's my neighbor, I know where she lives, and they, write in my address after the fact, that is not information that I provided, and it is not within what is permissible for a circulator to add after the fact, based on any information that they know, based on me being a neighbor and knowing where I live, or going and getting a voter roll and saying, oh, that's where she lives, and putting that information in when I did not include it as the petition signer.
All right. And so, of course, there have been some questions about the acceptance of whiteout information. If you wanted to comment on that, because that certainly would be a change or could be perceived as a change in a voter's intent.
Yes, well, in the memo that I prepared on August 2nd, I actually addressed some of that. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we received 8,528 petition pages, and we removed 4,802 lines. And those lines, as is indicated in my memo, whiteout lines that were rejected based on voter intent. If something was whited out that wholly changed what the voter or circulator originally wrote, or if DCBOE cannot determine what was changed, those lines were removed.
Okay, so voter intent is the trump. And your staff has to determine what the voter intent is. Okay. The Office of Planning was on earlier, Dr. Phillips, who has just been a sterling representative of our government over the years. I've known her for some time and know her to be pretty accurate with the information that she provides. Was very, very helpful, I believe, in helping us to understand their role in providing the statistical analysis. What I wasn't aware of is that your office has reviewed all of the signatures that you receive on whenever there's a challenge, I suppose, and certainly with the initiative process. And you have actually determined the ward in which each signature is represented. And so that does make it easier for the Office of Planning to do their job. So I just didn't know that, but now I get it when we talk about 8,000 petition forms with 10 signatures on each form. That is a tremendous volume of work that has been accomplished. So I thank you for that. Am I correct in my understanding of what the Office of Planning does?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I was just simply stating that the Office of Planning says that they review the, I think they actually called an Excel file of the petition forms that they get when you have an initiative before the board. And they review it to make sure that we have the appropriate number of signatures submitted by the anticipated and number of signatures needed for each ward. I see, Miss, oh my goodness, okay, all right.
Yeah, so
Dr.
I
Phillips is
think,
still here, all righty.
right, I'll repeat the yes, that what the Office of Planning does is a statistical process. We do not verify individual signatures. We just apply the formula to the signatures that come in, as you rightly said, is on an Excel spreadsheet that has the ward already assigned, and we follow that. The process just as outlined in the citation, the DC municipal regulation, we followed that process to send our results to the Board of Elections.
All right, and I know when you do statistics, there is a curve. So what is your analysis based on? Is it the total number of signatures that you count, or does that even matter?
Okay, so the analysis is a probability distribution. That's what it's generally called, a probability distribution. And what that means is that a probability distribution is used to describe scenarios where samples are drawn from a finite population without replacement. It models the probability of obtaining a specific number of successes, or in this case, acceptable petition signatures in a sample from a population consisting of both successes and failures, or accepted petition signatures and rejected petition signatures. So the steps employed by the Office of Planning will follow that principle based on probability distribution, and we're trying to get a 95% confidence level. So when the first sample of 100 is selected, again, as outlined in the citation, that you sample 100 from each ward, there we send that back to the Board of Elections. Since there is a unique ID, they will check those 100 signatures to see, to verify them that they have the correct ward and whatever else they look at. They will send us back and say, out of that 100, 94 of them are valid, or 93 or 95, whatever that number is. That gives us a probability number that we then apply to the whole apparent number of signatures to see if, with a 95% degree of confidence, that the signatures that came from each of those wards are enough to meet the requirements of that minimum, or exceeded that minimum that's required for each ward to go along with those signatures. So that's basically what the Office of Planning does.
Well, thank you very much. And I must ask, how long does this process take? Weeks, days, hours?
For the Office of Planning, it just depends. Okay, when we get that first files, it might take just a couple hours or so to get the random numbers back to the Board of Elections. Then the Board of Elections has to go and do their work in terms of verifying 100 of those from each of the wards. So that's 800. They have to go through each one of those. So as soon as they send it back to us, then we will put it into the distribution, the probability distribution, and get something back to them. So that second process might take just about a week. So for us, as long as we get the information back, in a sort of speedy manner, we can do it within a week. We can be over with it, and so on and so on. So it takes longer if we do not have enough signatures that are verified. Then we will pull another sample, and the process sort of starts all over again. So it depends on what happens on that first pull.
All right. And so if I kind of understand, we're saying that the board sends you the Excel file of all of the signatures, all of the pages. You
not the pages that were initially sent in to the board for the petition. This now is a clean file, an Excel file. So it's not the signature of the person that we get, just a representative of that record.
all right. So the board actually sends you, let's say if they have identified and put a tag on 1,000 names for Ward 1. They send you those 1,000 names. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have it. Okay. You get the 1,000 names. So what do you do with those 1,000 names?
What we do with those 1,000 names is that we do a random sample. There are different ways of doing a random sample. For the Initiative 83, we use R statistics. That's a statistical tool that you can derive samples with, and we just run it through. There are several. You can do it in Excel. There are several tools you can do it with. So that's the first step we do, is to run that random sample of 100 of the 1,000 that you mentioned as an example. Yeah.
All right. And so of the 1,000, do you then say back to the board, you should look at every number 8 or every 8th name that you have on the petition?
Well, yeah, that's the way of doing it. But from the 1,000, it might be number 5, number 50,
Any
number
number.
100, right? So we take 100 of those out of that 1,000 that you given as an example. We take 100 out of those. It can, it can appear anywhere in that 1,000 because there's a consecutive number from 1 to 1,000. We send that 100 of those back to the Board of Elections, and that's the ones that they use to make that verification as to whether or not they are valid for that ward.
All right. Okay. I hope the public hears that and understands how this is done. It's been a mystery when you say a random sample, people always, it can be so many different ways, but I haven't done surveys. I know that you have to have some universe you're working with. And so that's why I wanted to make sure. I threw out 8, but it could have been 3. It could have been, any number, any cardinal number. Yes. Thank you very much for that. And I guess that this all depends on the total number of the universe, like we're talking 1,000. So that means that we would not ask, if we're trying to get 100, a sample of 100, we would not ask for every 200th name. We would want to make sure that we could come up with the universe of 100.
Well, the 100 will be the random sample. The universe
Yeah.
will be the number of apparent signatures for the petition. And the universe of that then will be the 5% that was mentioned earlier by the Board of Elections in terms of those registered voters within that ward.
All right. Well, thank you. Everyone, very complicated, right? So we know that this is not just, random. This is real. This is how we get things done. So thank you very much, Dr. Phillips. And I will continue
Thank you.
with the residency requirements. Many elected positions in the district require a candidate to reside in the district or in a particular ward or ANC area. Does the board confirm residency for any of the candidates?
So just out of our routine work, if someone files a petition of candidacy, a declaration of candidacy and their information, we don't have a process where we check all the hundreds of ANCs and check, all of the addresses to verify residency requirement. That is not part of what we do.
All right, so when there is a question about the residency of a candidate, I recall a few years ago, there were concerns. I saw a news clipping where there was an interview with a relative of a candidate, and the relative interviewed by, I believe it was maybe ABC, I'm not sure, one of the networks. And the relative said, well, yes, he's a relative, but no, he doesn't really live here, but he had used that address. How do you get that kind of information? Is it incumbent upon someone who thinks they have information to inform the board? And if they inform you, is there any action you can take, or is it not even an area that we've considered in the past?
Are you asking if the board enforces residency requirements for elected officials such that it's on the board's, within the board's wheelhouse to take action against elected officials who we determine do not live where they are supposed to?
Yes.
No, that's not the board's responsibility to, remove someone from office because they don't reside. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm really asking what do we do, and what can be done if we aren't doing anything. If a individual is, let's say, a candidate for a particular office, I'm back to my ANC example, or if a person has been elected and residents in that area discover, well, how did he get elected? Well, he got elected because people voted for him, obviously. But is there something in the code, or is there a procedure that the Board of Elections has where you receive that information, and what could you do with that information?
So if an individual does not, so for declarations of candidacy, we confirm the address that's provided to determine whether or not they actually reside at that address, and if that address is within the appropriate electoral jurisdiction. And if it turns out that you provided an address that does not conform with the jurisdiction that you're seeking office in, then of course you're not eligible to hold that office. In terms of whether an individual is found to not, if it's brought to the board's attention that an individual does not reside within the particular electoral jurisdiction that is appropriate for the office that they hold, it is not clear to me that the board could take action to have that individual removed from office.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, we don't have like investigatory authority. So, people own multiple properties in the district. People may have a residential address and have a parent that they're caring for, an ailing parent. And so they spend evenings with the, ailing parent overnight to provide health care because they may have a daytime health nurse. We have a lot of different scenarios where somebody may not actually sleep at their residence for a particular number of nights. And so we do not have the authority to say you must, sleep here a certain number of evenings in order to maintain your residency. We do not investigate that. We pretty much have the declaration of candidacy. We verify that it falls within the jurisdiction for which the office they're seeking. And unless there is something that, is overwhelming, as for instance, if, you provide an address that does not exist, or you provide an address and it's, I don't know, a vacant lot, there are some things that, may rise to us taking some sort of action. But I would just say, as far as a general course of business, we do not follow up on verifying the residence of the residences of candidates.
All right, thank you. That's very important because the ANC situation that I mentioned was real, and there were concerns, and from time to time, I continue to hear of that kind of situation. So I just wanted to have on the record just what does the board do? What can the board do? So thank you very, very much for that. And then I just have one other area, an area that you are most concerned with, and that's the warehouse and the office space. We know that the improvements to the warehouse on V Street have been slow coming. And so what is the current situation to your understanding as it relates to you having adequate space for you've clearly done or are doing your training for your volunteers, but also the checking or testing of your equipment, which is going to go out to each of the polling locations. And then, of course, the election night vote count. What is the status? I know you've said previously you have tremendous support from your partners, Department of General Services, and of course, with the schools and the police, the MPD, where they will be there when you need them. And the schools, we use a lot of our schools for the actual voting locations. So if you could just talk a little bit about the warehouse and the agreements and understandings you have with other agencies that support the work that you must do.
Absolutely, thank you. So we do have our traditional warehouse location, and that is where we house our voting equipment. And we initially had to conduct logic and accuracy testing and our mail ballot processing in that space because when that legislation came about and we were mailing ballots, et cetera, and having to expand our operations, we did not have a place to go that would house that. We did receive some additional space at 3535 V Street, and that is where we are currently conducting our logic and accuracy testing. However, we were not given full access to that space, nor given all of the space that we told we were going to get in order to facilitate those processes and have adequate office space for those who work at the operations center. And so we are now exploring other opportunities with DGS to possibly look at other space because it looks like the space we were initially promised will not be available for the election cycle. And so we are hoping to hear something sooner than later. We submitted a memo with our requirements and with the specifications of what we need to the city administrator through, and that came through Board of Elections and through DGS, and we're waiting to hear back. One of the problems is timing because, as you know, ballots go out next week, and then we will begin processing mail ballots shortly thereafter. And if we are in a posture where we have to move equipment and have equipment calibrated and set up, that will require us to bring in vendors to do that. We have reached out to vendors and they are on standby and can accommodate us if we get the green light. However, we need to be able to make those arrangements sooner than later because we're dealing with a very busy election cycle, and even the vendors with whom we work do not just work with the District of Columbia. They have other clients as well. And they are very anxious for us to get back to them as far as scheduling. And then we need to know what is going to happen so that we can appropriately pivot and make sure everything is in place for any electrical modifications that need to be made and any moving that needs to be made of people, processes, or equipment.
Well, thank you very much. As I made initial inquiries on your behalf and did have done several follow-ups, I will continue. I hope that, or my hope is that this situation will come to a head in the next few days. You are right. This is just, it's very difficult, and we understand the circumstances, but it doesn't make the solution bring it any closer to resolution. And so I'll do what I can. The city administrator is also in our committee, so hopefully that helps, or it should be helpful. And maybe we can get instant attention. Maybe his staff is watching us right now and will understand that this has to be done. I continue to tell people we do not want to become the shame of the election process by not having a suitable vote count center where people are expected to observe the election. This is historic for DC because we also are implementing the Non-Resident Voting Act. And so it's more than just it being, a very hyped, national election time, but it's also about what we do locally. And we want to make sure that we are in the best light as we continue to talk about it and hopefully move closer to statehood for our community, which could make a difference for us.
Yes, and council member, I would just like to also thank you on the record because you have been an advocate and you have definitely been working with us to resolve the space issues, you and your staff. And so I do want to thank you for your efforts.
Well, you are welcome. No problem. It's what I should be doing, what I do. One last question about the mail-in ballots. And what kind of relationship do we really have with the United Postal Service? Are they working with us? I hear that nationwide there's still some real issues and concerns.
Yes, there absolutely are issues and concerns, and we have had many conversations with our local USPS representatives. Recently, National Association of State Election Directors and National Association of Secretaries of State wrote a joint letter to the U.S. Postal Service. And as a result of that joint letter, we have received a very positive response from our USPS representatives in the District of Columbia. And there is a willingness to assist us and work with getting election mail to and from individuals timely. We did have some issues with the primary with ballots being received in a timely manner and then voted ballots coming back to us in a timely manner. But they are investigating. We are confident that all eyes are on election mail and on what we are doing with getting things delivered timely and efficiently. So we will continue to monitor the situation, but we are hopeful that now that the matter has been escalated, that the appropriate individuals now have their finger on the pulse of the problem and that we'll be able to move forward with a successful election cycle. I know different areas of the District of Columbia, in particular wards, have more issues than other wards. And so I know that is being looked at as well.
I appreciate that information. As you were speaking, I was wondering about how are we also checking the drop boxes? And yes, I know you're checking them to pick up the mail, but are we checking them periodically in the course of the week to make sure there are no malfunctions? There's been no vandalism or attempts to access these things. The more I read about some of what goes on in our region, I get concerned about any so-called lockbox because it could be tempting. We know it only has a ballot, but it's tempting.
Absolutely. And as I'm sure you know, we have had instances of vandalism and things being posted on our mail ballot drop boxes. And so we do address those matters very quickly. And in light of some of the intel and some of the news stories we've received from other jurisdictions, we actually are placing additional protocols in place for the handling of ballots placed in mail ballot drop boxes. So we absolutely are paying greater attention to the drop boxes as well.
All right, and then a final question about security. We have the legislation in place to protect our workers, but I hope that you also have safeguards in place at your office to provide protection there as well.
We do.
All right. And I'll just, 1 second, let me check with the team here. All right, we do have one addition that we would like to get you to respond to. I note in the reports that you have made previously, you indicate that DPW is a part of the team. I guess, do they do ballot pickup for you or empty the boxes? The mail drop boxes, or how do they help you implement the elections?
Yes, they actually place the mail ballot drop boxes around the city. So we have 55 mail ballot drop boxes. And so they are responsible for getting those from our warehouse location and placing those in the locations that we where we need them. But they do not handle any ballots, only those employed by BOE handle ballots and engage in the pickup and delivering of those ballots.
All right. Do you have any other agency that is delivering materials or are on election day or early voting, or maybe going to some of the senior buildings? I know that you have a secure process in some of the senior housing developments.
Yes, we have partnerships with other entities, but as far as getting ballots, that is handled once again by DCBOE. Other organizations may assist with informational materials and flyers and brochures and handing those out and leaving those at facilities or other locations throughout the district. But as far as ballots, that is done by those employed by Board of Elections.
All right. And so the cartridges that are removed from or placed in and removed from the voting equipment at the various polling sites is handled by your staff exclusively.
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you very much. All right. Well, guess what? We are 1 minute before 4 p.m. I know, hooray. And I want to thank you all immensely for giving us time devoted exclusively to talking about the preparation for the November 5th election. We anticipate it'll be a strong turnout. as it has been in the past when we have a federal election year. And so we just want to make sure that everything is in tip-top shape and that we can anticipate a strong outcome based on that and the work that Ms. Evans and her team are doing at the board. She's relatively new, as you recall. She doesn't have a 10-year history yet. It's coming, but it's so frequently we think if someone's new on board and responsible for these many different services that they can go haywire. But what we have seen over the last two elections has been, gives us, we think we've seen a clean audit. And so we're looking for that again with the board. And we want to thank you very much for spending this time with us today and better informing the public of where we are and what we've done and how we've done it and get things done. So, and we did take some notes. We know that there's some sprucing up of the process that we anticipate can be done. And so thank you very, very much. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge that we are now, I talked long enough for us to be exactly at 4 p.m. And so this roundtable is adjourned. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councilmember.